Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads. Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as always. This is episode 87. I hope everybody's having a fantastic week out there. We're having a great week over here at the Drum Shuffle World Headquarters. Have a fantastic interview for you today. We are going to be rejoined by the wonderful Dena Tauriello right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, everybody. I know that you are going to enjoy this interview. Dena Tauriello is just a fantastic human being, first and foremost. Just one of my favorite people, and so glad that I've gotten to know her and we've become friends. But she is just absolutely getting it done on Broadway. The last time Dena joined us was way back on episode 51. So if you haven't caught that episode, go back and listen to it, because we talked about, where she came from and her upbringing and all that good stuff. But at that time, she was just getting ready to finish her run with the Head Over Heels musical that featured the music of the Go-Go's. And I invited Dena to come back and catch everybody up on what she's up to now, which she is drumming in Little Shop of Horrors on Broadway. And they did a cast album that just hit the streets a couple of weeks back. But it's always great to catch up with Dena, and she's just so insightful and so positive about everything. I know everybody's going to love this interview. So please help me welcome back to the Drum Shuffle, Dena Tauriello. Hey, Dena, good morning. How are you, friend?
I'm good, Jamie. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay. I can't complain. Been battling a little bit of a cold, so I might sound a little funny. So bear with me on that.
No problem.
So how are things in the big city? I know you've been really busy, and we're going to dive into all that, but are things well with you?
Things are great here. Things are great. We've had a fairly mild winter thus far here in New Jersey, New York City, and it's been pretty bearable so far, knock on wood, so all is well. So
no snowmageddon yet this year for you?
Not yet. We had a little snow on Saturday. A couple days ago we had some snow, but it's been like super mild and really, actually nice being outside, nice doing the commute 6 days a week and, no worries. So that makes life a lot easier around here.
For sure. Well, so The last time we had you here on the Drum Shuffle, and thank you for coming back. We really appreciate it. I love catching up with
pleasure.
you. Yeah, you're one of my favorite people on the planet, so we always love having you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the last time we had you here, it was way back on episode 51. It's been over a year ago, just over a year ago. And when we last spoke to you, I think you had either 4 or 5 shows left with the Head Over Heels musical. And you were, I think where we left it was, I've got some things in the hopper. I'll come back and tell you what those are. So talk to us a little bit about how your run ended with Head Over Heels. And I know you're doing the Little Shop of Horrors show now, but maybe there was something that kind of happened in between. Talk to me a little bit about a Broadway player. When one show ends, you're probably like, oh my God, I got to find something else. Talk to us about that process, and then let's get into Little Shop.
All right, will do. So taking us back about a year, finishing up Head Over Heels was very, very emotional for me. I started work there, it was February of 2018. And then we went to San Francisco and we ran for 6 weeks and then came to Broadway and did previews in June. And then we ran until January, just to give you kind of a refresher on the time frame. So I was with these folks for all in all a little under a year. And that's a pretty good amount of time to spend together when you're there 6 days a week, 8 shows a week, right?
Yeah.
So they were really wonderful people, in addition to being really incredibly talented. There was incredible choreography in the show. There was, a tremendous amount of vocal requirements from all these people, right? And they were just nuts. They were all so talented, and they were lovely. And it was really a true pleasure to go to work every day and be in that environment. And people had said to me, don't get used to this. Shows aren't usually like this or aren't always like this, in terms of how great it was, the vibe. Everybody talks about, the vibe and the hang are the words that you hear a lot. The hang, it's about the hang, meaning, are you cool to be around? And if you are, you're going to get more work. Don't be a pain in the ass. It's kind of the gist,
Yeah, well, we talk about that all the time on this show, and I know you listen to episodes when you can, but it's 40% about your playing and 60% about the hang, because you're
Absolutely.
In a traditional rock band, you're trapped on a 50-foot long metal tube 22 hours a day with those people, and it's
that's right.
And you toured for a long time with Antigone Rising, and you guys were road dogs.
We were.
And I know that you're just a pleasure to be around, but I think what we're getting at is some of these Broadway shows, people are like, oh crap, I got to go do 2 shows today with these people and they're monsters, so.
Yeah. Kind of the upside, if you're working with, as a musician, if you're working with people in the cast who maybe aren't so nice, I think you have a little more of an option to remove yourself from them. You're in your pit, you're in your room. Head Over Heels, I literally was by myself almost the entire show.
Oh, that's right.
In my own room.
Yeah.
Because we did the reveal at the end of the show, so the rest of the band was actually up on stage,
right.
But they were behind a scrim, and then I would run up there and join them. So I literally was by myself almost the whole time. So you can, if you have to, you can get yourself out of Dodge. Like you can hide yourself if you have to, but that's no fun.
Right.
It's a lot of, those are, like I said, 6 days a week, you have to go and you have to be around these people, and it's just much nicer if you like everyone and you get along. It's enjoyable to be there. So I had that, and saying goodbye to that, in addition to sort of the uncertainty of, well, how long, if and when, you don't even want to assume you're going to get another show. You do the math. There's, I think, 42 or 43 Broadway theaters.
Yeah.
And not every show is a musical. So you scale that down, you're into probably the 30s-ish of how many Broadway chairs there are.
Right.
Or even less than 30, if you do math on that. So
well, and in the city, there's 7 million players that are fantastic,
right.
so
right.
I get where you're coming from. You can't just assume you're going to go right back to work in a week or two.
Yeah. And having been on the inside of the Broadway experience and watching a show get put together and, kind of hearing them talk about the process of when the show, they first started doing readings and workshops and all this stuff. It takes years for shows to go from their infancy stages of here's a show and let's do a reading or let's do a workshop. And then we have a theater and we're going to do this. It's like 7 years, 8 years, 5 years. I mean, they don't take a minute,
Right.
So even that in and of itself makes it a whole other level of, wow, this takes a long time. Oh, and then we have to wait until we have a theater. Oh, and then we have to see if we have money. And then we have to, there's all these tremendous amount of variables. So at our closing party, such a strange thing in Broadway. When you open a show, they say happy opening. And when you close a show, they say happy closing. And to me, there was nothing happy about it. I was very, very, very sad having to say goodbye to this opportunity and these people, although so incredibly thankful for having had the experience and having had the opportunity to work on the show. That was the only good thing, happy, quote unquote, about it,
Right.
So we're at this after party and the Go-Go's were there and we're sort of like, going around the room and talking to people and all this stuff. And I make my way around the room and I go to our music supervisor, whose name is Tom Kitt. And if you don't know that name, if you are into Broadway at all, if you pay attention a little bit to your playbills or to what's happening on theater, you should know the name because the man is involved in so many shows. It's mind-boggling. He's, first of all, one of the nicest people on the planet and as incredibly talented as he is nice. So he does orchestrations, he writes music, he does all this stuff. And he was the supervisor on Head Over Heels, and he was working on or had another show in the cooker. Well, I mean, several, but he spoke to me specifically on the night of our closing party. He says, "Hey, I have another show for you."
Oh, what a relief.
Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it. I almost fell over. And he says to me, the show is Magic Mike. It's the Broadway adaptation of the movie. Channing Tatum and Steven Soderbergh produced it and blah, blah, blah. For those of you who aren't familiar, it was an enormous money-making machine. And I was excited not only to have another show, but to have a show that, with knowing little to nothing about it because I hadn't yet seen the movie, I knew that it had done exceptionally well in the movie theater. So you think just in terms of a fan base and who that will translate to for a Broadway following, you think, oh, this could run for probably about a year without even trying very hard.
Right, well, right, because of the name recognition alone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And people who love the movie and they're going to be interested and they're going to want to see it. So I was so excited. And my partner, now wife, Sandra, was extremely excited because we're like, oh my gosh, this is going to be, what a relief. This is great. We signed a 2-year lease on a new apartment. We're rocking and rolling, right?
Yeah, everything's good.
So he explained to me, so we think, right?
Right.
He explains to me the time frame. We were going to look to do a lab in May. So this was this past May. And it was going to do a little rehearsal stuff in New York City in October, run in Boston, and then open on Broadway sometime in 2020. And I'm like, that's amazing. So literally the end of January, so just about a year ago, tickets went on sale for Boston. And they were selling out, and it was like we're at this huge theater, and again, so excited. So now it's May. We're into the lab. We're doing, we're 4 days into the lab, and there were creative differences. I think between the producers, Steven Soderbergh was producing the show, was one of the producers, as was Channing Tatum, and these are Hollywood people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm hearing now that I've, expanded my circles and I've met new people and I talk to people in the Broadway world, how people who aren't Broadway people and who try to either write music or do music or bring things to Broadway don't necessarily understand Broadway and what makes things work for a Broadway audience versus what makes things work on a screen. They're just different.
Yeah, well, so, and you're talking about not to interrupt, but you're talking about two immovable objects too. The way Hollywood does things and the way Broadway does things. There are reasons for it, but those are two immovable objects. So I can see where heads might butt a little bit.
Yeah. So in sort of piecing it together, it just seemed that they're, like things, they were wanting things done a certain way, and then things couldn't or wouldn't be done a certain way, and they decided to just pull the plug on it. So they called us into the rehearsal studio, and at 3:00, which was strange, and they'd given us the day off prior, which was also a little odd, and I didn't know what was up. And I go in thinking, okay, well, we're just starting late today and whatever. And I'm like getting my music, my charts up, and I'm getting ready to start rehearsing. And they say, we have an announcement to make. The show's been canceled. And my jaw hit my snare drum. Like I was, are you what? What are you talking about?
Man, I just signed a new lease.
Right. What about oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that sucks.
So I was like, I got sucker punched. The wind was just knocked out of me. I couldn't believe it. And, you think, I don't know. I'm so new to this that I never in a million years thought that would happen. And I knew Tom had said he'd been working on the show for 7 years. So
wow, there
you go, done.
Yeah.
So, and that's all that I know about it. It was creative differences, and it's done. And anytime I try to do any research, because I'd like to see what's coming. Not only do I work, in this arena, but I enjoy it as well. So we like to go see shows, and we like to know what's happening and, what's coming in. And it just vanished. So it seems like it's just done and it's never coming back. So I'm like, okay, now what? So before I had started working on that lab, I had been called to do an off-Broadway show over the summer. And I was like, okay, great. Timing will work. The lab for Mike is in May. We're not doing anything until October. I can do this off-Broadway thing over the summer. It's awesome. And what I'm also learning in navigating this crazy world is the earlier you can get in on something, the more likelihood you have that it becomes yours if it comes to Broadway. So if you're in on it from the beginning stages, it's common courtesy that you get asked to do the show. It doesn't always happen that way, but it typically happens that way. So I'm like, great, let me do an off-Broadway thing, and then if it goes to Broadway, like I'm in, this will be great.
Right.
And it was a rock opera of the Lizzie Borden story, and it's been running all over the world. It's run in a couple of cities here in the States, and it's run in, I forget which countries, but several countries, other countries, and the music is amazing. And I was so excited about it. And same thing, we were a few weeks away we actually had a theater. It was announced we were moving into this off-Broadway theater, and I got a call from the same music contractor who was working on Magic Mike, and he's like, you're not going to believe this. I got bad news for you. And I go, what? He goes, Lizzie's canceled. And I go, you're kidding me. And he's like, no, dude, I'm so sorry. It's like, literally in 2 weeks, it was somewhere in a 2 or 3 week window, I lost 2 shows.
Man, come on now. I mean, it's,
now I'm going, are you kidding? Is this a joke? Am I being punked? Like, what's that? Is there a camera? What's happening?
Well, I mean, I think we've all lost gigs before. I mean, whether it's Broadway or, gigs end. I've played in bands that were, out doing stuff, and it's like, yeah, man, I'm going off the road. I'm not playing anymore. I'm going home to my family. Yeah. So, to have 2 of those in quick succession, I'm sure at some point you're like, man, what is really going on here?
Yeah. And it's just, again, since Head Over Heels was my first Broadway thing, I hadn't ever subbed. I hadn't done anything. And so I don't really know this world, or I'm starting to learn it. Obviously, it's a learn as you go. You figure it out as you go along kind of thing in terms of how things work and what can happen, what does happen, what's the norm, obviously this is unusual, but it does happen. These things happen. Unfortunately, they happened to me in a really short period of time, and it was a really painful learning lesson because, one of the things that is so attractive about doing Broadway work is that it's consistent. The pay per show isn't what's so lucrative. It's the consistency that makes it a lucrative gig, that makes it good money.
Yeah.
Especially for us in the world of entertainment, to know that you have 8 gigs a week for an indefinite amount of time is such an incredible blessing and a relief.
Well, yeah, because you're not out there scratching to make it happen. I mean, I get that, to have that consistency and, what's going to be deposited into the bank next Friday. I mean, that's huge in the world of entertainment.
Mm-hmm. It's such an incredible blessing. And then I have a drummer friend who calls shows like, Hamilton or Wicked or Lion King, the ones that just run forever. He calls them government jobs. He goes, they're not going anywhere. You just have this job, and then you get to go to work every day. And it's those shows are obviously really rare.
Yeah.
And then the thing, what I've found that happens to us, and this is just the nature of the beast, it's really hard to stay in the moment and appreciate what you have and enjoy what you have. Here I am at Little Shop now, thank God. August, I think it was July, I got called. So I think June might have been when I got the call. Maybe it was early June saying that Lizzie wasn't happening. And I think we were supposed to open in early July. And then it was July that I got an email asking me to go take a meeting with the guy who was set to be the music director of Little Shop. And I didn't even know what show it was. It was like the email said, hey, this guy, is putting some people together for a new show that's coming in, and he wants to meet with you. I think you should go. It was the same music contractor. Michael Ahrens is his name. So now I worked with him on Head Over Heels. He's the one who called me for Head Over Heels. He was the contractor for Magic Mike and for Lizzie and for Little Shop. So I've now done, all 4 of my shows have been with Michael. So he called me and was like, you sent me an email and said you should go meet with this guy. And I was like, okay, great. And I met with him in July. And 2 weeks later, I got told that the gig was mine, and we were starting rehearsals in the middle of August.
Well, and that had to be a huge relief, obviously.
It was such a relief. I was like, oh, thank God. And then to know I didn't even know that Little Shop was coming. And to know that it was not only that show, but the star power in this show was a huge relief, because the plan is for this to be like the original adaptation that was off Broadway for 5 years. They are intentionally keeping it in a small theater. They want it to be a small theater. They don't want to take it to Broadway, even though it's, when we opened, it was Jonathan Groff. I don't know if you're familiar with that name, but he is for those who don't know, he's the voice of Kristoff in Frozen. He was he's I think he's a 2-time Tony-nominated actor. He was in the original Spring Awakening, which is where he started. He was the original King in Hamilton. He is on the Netflix series Mindhunter. He's the lead in Mindhunter. He was on Glee. Okay, so he was not a chump by any means. Like he's pretty well known. And the lines are like around the block for him to sign autographs every night. And Christian Borle, who's a 2-time Tony-winning actor, and Tammy Blanchard, who is an Emmy-winning actress. I think she's been once or twice Tony-nominated. So these are heavy hitters, and even the creative team. It's Michael Mayer's the director, who's been nominated for a Tony in every major category and has won a Tony. It's the sound designer from Hadestown. It's the lighting designer from Hades. I mean, these are all Broadway people, like heavy-hitting Broadway people. So the intention here is you're getting a top-notch Broadway production in a 270-seat theater.
Oh, wow,
it's incredible. It's amazing. It's a phenomenal show.
Yeah. Now, look, and I'm no Broadway expert by any stretch of the imagination, but like you said, Little Shop was off Broadway for, however many years. How long had it been since there was an adaptation of Little Shop running in the city? I know there was a big break in there.
There was, I want to say it was 2003 or 4. I don't know if it goes that far back, but I think it's around there.
Okay.
They did a Broadway revival of it. And, Alan Menken, who was one of the co-writers he did all the music. His partner, Howard Ashman, wrote the lyrics and the book, so the story. And Howard passed in the early 90s. And the Ashman estate actually has been pretty hands-on and active here. Like they were at the first day of rehearsals. Alan Menken has been at rehearsals when we made the cast recording. Alan Menken was there. He was, we just played, Jonathan Groff's last show was last night. So he was there last night, and at the after party. I mean, they've been very hands-on intentionally. They want this to feel like the original. They want the score to be like the original,
Right.
And that's what it is, and it's really, really special.
Sure.
Great.
Well, and with there being a huge break, in there, there's going to be that, what's the word I'm looking for? There's an appetite for people that may have seen the show, 15 years ago, or, people may remember the movie. I want to say it was Rick Moranis.
Yep.
Wasn't that the late 80s that the movie was out?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when these things go away, right, and then they come back, there's almost like this, energization, if that's even a word, but people get re-energized about going back to see the show. So I would imagine it's been hugely successful, in its short time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of a perfect storm, in that it's a tremendous cast and the fact that it hasn't been accessible in a while. So the reviews were great. And I know from my experience at Head Over Heels that makes a difference. Unfortunately, we got mixed reviews. Some publications really loved the show, but the New York Times, for better or for worse, really is what kind of drives it and is what everybody looks to. So if the Times, it's not always the case because there have been shows in years that the Times didn't give great reviews to and they still survived and they did well in spite of that. But more often than not, kind of the Times dictates things,
Yeah, well,
and they were not favorable to Head Over Heels, but they did love Little Shop. So, yay.
Well,
yay for us.
Right. Well, in the world of rock and roll, you're talking about the Times. In the world of rock and roll, of course, it's kind of Rolling Stone, right? If they pan your record, it's probably not going to do well. And every time I think about that, I say, go back in time and read the original review of Led Zeppelin 1 that Rolling Stone gave out, and it was basically like, oh, these guys are hacks, they're just regurgitating blues music. It's terrible. Led Zeppelin did okay.
They overcame that a little bit.
They got past their panning by Rolling Stone. So look, I understand there's a need for critics and I get all that, but all I'm saying is for our listeners, take that stuff with a grain of salt. Just because some critic says something isn't good or it's the greatest thing since sliced bread doesn't always translate into what you're gonna like. So
absolutely.
Well, now you mentioned the cast.
It's such a subjective thing, right? Art in general. For any one person to have that strong of an opinion about it, and for everyone else to just take that to heart and think that means that it's what it is, it's crap or it's whatever. I won't like it. It's so subjective, and what speaks to one doesn't always speak to another. So definitely, find your own way out there in the world. Figure it out. Don't be so reliant on that stuff. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, from your lips to God's ears, as we say here in the South, I mean, we're recording this, 5 or 6 days after, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees were announced for this year. And, look, I lost my mind a little bit, Whitney Houston, the Notorious B.I.G., both inducted, which I think they're very valid artists. I think both of them deserve all the accolades and honors in the world that they can get. But when Whitney Houston goes in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before Judas Priest and Motorhead, I've got a problem with that.
And Pat Benatar. Excuse me, Pat Benatar.
Yeah.
Hello.
Todd Rundgren. I mean, and so all of that stuff is subjective. And and biased. And when people say, oh, I'm completely unbiased, whenever somebody says to me, I'm completely unbiased, I know they're full of crap. Because
it's like their false disclaimer.
Exactly. Because when somebody says I'm completely unbiased here, that means you're super biased. And everybody has those, biases in their life. So I think you do have to take it with a grain of salt, and you can't get too wrapped up into, who won what Grammy, who won what Tony, whatever the world is. It's all subjective. You got to find what makes you happy.
Absolutely. And sadly, I've come to learn, growing up, I always loved the Tonys. That was my favorite award show always. I thought it was the best. It was the most well done. I thought it was just like classy and smooth, like it was streamlined and it moved. The pacing was great and it was entertaining and all that stuff. And I'm so disillusioned now because I've come to find out, again, from people that I know in the industry, how political the Tonys are, too, like everything else, right? Everything's political. And it's so disheartening to me that this is what it's about, that it's about politics and it's about who you know, and it can't just be about, and again, I understand that it's still subjective, even within that, in terms of who you think did the best job acting or whatever, the best music, but I just wish it wasn't political. And you mentioned the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and that is such a ridiculous political thing that I read something interesting, and I won't go into a huge diatribe about this because I could very easily.
Hey, it's your show, Dena.
And I understand that the Rock Hall has different categories. So you have sort of the influencer category, and it's not solely about quote unquote rock and roll. Like people clearly are in and have been inducted who are not quote unquote rock and roll, the staple singers and people like that. So I understand, I think to a certain degree, how you might include a Whitney, perhaps. Maybe. I mean, I'm still not sure that I'm on board with that choice, but it was interesting how I heard somebody make this comment, why are we saying Whitney over Pat as if it's still there's only like room for one female artist every time there's an induction,
which is
when have you seen multiple female?
I know.
Right.
I could go on for an hour about it. Link Ray, I don't think is still in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the guy invented the friggin' power chord on guitar. I mean, come on. So
things like that. And for me, again, speaking close to my heart, the Carpenters are not in. And if you're talking about influencers, I mean, they were the most successful American music act of the 1970s.
Yes.
And if you look at their album sales worldwide compared with many of the artists who have already been inducted, their sales are pretty much identical. So if you're talking from an influencer perspective and the fact of their massive success in the 70s, and you look at artists like Madonna and people who have cited Karen Carpenter as being, a huge role model for her vocally and things like, maybe Madonna's not a great example, I'm sorry, but that was the first one that came to mind. But not like she's a vocal machine, but anyway, I digress. But like they should clearly be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame under the influencer category. So to choose Whitney over them because they go so much farther back, their roots are anyway. It's crazy. And Pat Benatar, and I'm not saying that Pat deserved it necessarily over Judas Priest or Motorhead. I'm not putting her over them, but for me personally, you turned on MTV. I'm old enough that I remember being a kid and turning on MTV, like literally when it first started, and there was Pat Benatar everywhere. And Myron Grumbacher was like one of my favorite drummers because I got to see him on MTV, and Pat was one of my favorite artists. And she was the shit then. I mean, she was doing it, She was a vocal powerhouse, and she was rocking, and she was awesome. And as a female who was into music and into rock music specifically, to see that all the time and to be so into her music and to know how many women specifically she influenced, it's a crime to me that she's not in again, because I think women are underrepresented as it is, in music and certainly in rock and roll. And I mean, the women deserve to be in. I mean, come on. It's crazy. But anyway, I'm going to step down off my soapbox. I'm done.
I could not agree with you more, Dena, as is the case with most things when we discuss this stuff. I mean, I think you and I see eye to eye on it. It's, we need a better way, I think, of recognizing people and I don't want to get into a huge rabbit hole here, but, the great Tanya Tucker, country artist, hadn't put out a record in, 15, 16 years. She put out a great record with, Brandi Carlile was one of the co-producers on it. But basically it was, Give Me My Flowers While I'm Alive, was I think one of the songs on there. We need to recognize these people while we can. And it's, I think the nod, for example, to Motorhead was, oh my God, we lost Lemmy a couple of years back. Maybe we should put him on the ballot. I mean, look, bands like Judas Priest, dare I say, they invented the British invasion of heavy metal to the United States.
Totally.
So if you want to talk about influence, I would say it doesn't get much bigger than that. Without Judas Priest, you probably never have Metallica. So, I mean, I think we can trace all of those things back to a certain root, and we kind of tend to snub those roots when we want to recognize them. I'm a member of the Recording Academy. I vote on the Grammys, and when I did my ballot back in December, I'm serious. Like in the pop category or the rock category, I almost didn't recognize any of the names. It's gotten that bad that it's like, Jesus, did nobody that I've actually ever heard release a record this year? and the answer is definitely no, that's not the case. It's just they're not being recognized. So I don't know. I don't know how we fix that, but it's certainly an ongoing issue. So, well, I appreciate your insights on that. Now, getting back to your career, you mentioned the cast record for Little Shop. Talk to me a little bit about that. I know that was just released digitally just a few weeks ago. So talk to me a little bit about that process. That must have been pretty cool for you to get to go in the studio and do that music as a release. Yes. Yeah.
It was, you always hope when you're working on a show, because it's not a given that every show you work on will do a cast recording, because obviously it requires money, right? Everything requires it comes down to money, unfortunately. And when when we got word that we were going to go in and do a cast recording, I was so excited for a variety of reasons. As an artist, you always love the opportunity to kind of leave your mark out there, to have a permanent record, so to speak, no pun intended, of what you're doing, of your work. You leave a little tiny imprint somewhere out there in the musical universe. So there's that. And, obviously from the business side of things, it means potential future revenue. You'll get residual on album sales. So that's always great. Unless you're on Hamilton or a show of that magnitude, it doesn't tend to, you're not talking about millions of copies sold, but still, it's like, oh, great. We're going to, we can sell records and super, but it's really more, it's about, hey, it's out there, isn't this cool? I got to do this and it's out there. And we got to do it. I think we tracked it in October. And it's always a hellacious thing trying to make a Broadway record, because you have to work around days off and things of that nature, because obviously you're running a show 8 times a week. Right. You're not going to cancel a show to go make a record. So you've got to work it in on your day, for the equity day off. So the actors have to go in on Monday and do the recording. Sometimes they ask the musicians to also be in there, but to really make sure that everything gets done. This is twice now that this is how it went for me, because it was the same with Head Over Heels. We have a Sunday matinee at 3:00. So they had the musicians go into the recording studio at 10 a.m. on Sunday. We tracked until 2:00. We hustled over to the theater. We did our matinee, our show is only 2 hours long. So we went from 3 to 5. We were back in the studio at 6, and I worked until 11:45 that night. So that was our recording experience. So it can be, I mean, it's tough. You got to squeeze it. And Head Over Heels was the same way. We had a matinee. We came in early. We did the matinee. We came back. It was crazy. So, and then that allows a full day Monday for the actors to go in and do all the vocals. So we were done with all the music in one day. We did the whole recording in one day.
Sounds a whole lot like you're doing the Jamie Eads recording schedule there. It just seems to be that's the way all of my sessions go. It's like, hey, we need 14 drum tracks in the next 3 hours. Can you do that? Sure.
Why not?
I wouldn't be real picky about the snare sound though.
That's right. You get what you get.
Yeah. So, but when I saw you, on social media, you were like, hey, this just happened. How cool, kind of thing. I was really excited to hear about it. So, that hit the streets in December. Is that right?
Yes. December 20th, I believe, was the official digital drop date.
And there's rumor that there's going to be some physical copy, maybe?
That's what I've been told. I don't know what the holdup has been, but they definitely want it to sell at the theater along with the rest of the merch.
Oh, okay.
That we have. We have some T-shirts and posters and little plants and fun little memorabilia and stuff that we sell. And my understanding is they want to add the CDs to that merch.
Cool.
So,
cool.
But I haven't been given any official word on that when it's going to happen.
Okay. Well, and presumably, you can go grab this cast recording wherever fine digital music is sold.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. So for those of you out there listening to our interview, help Dena with, the payments on the new lease of the apartment, with some residual mechanical royalties. Go buy a copy, right, Dena?
That's right. I think they're calling it the new off-Broadway. I think it's called the new off-Broadway, but because there's a few different recordings up there. It's the one with the white background. It's white background and red and green letters. That's the graphic that you're looking for.
All right. So
the other ones were like more of a solid green kind of vibe, but this is white. It's a white background.
Okay. So that's what you're looking for.
You'll see Jonathan Groff's name comes up. You'll see Jonathan's name associated with it. So that'll be the
Okay, cool.
The foolproof way to make sure you got the right one.
All right. So kids, that's your homework assignment for this week. Go find a copy and let's help Dena out. So after we had you on the show last year, I didn't get any specific, hey, will you ask Dena kind of emails, but I did get into a conversation with a couple of listeners via email, and they were like, how hard is it to do a Broadway show? Wouldn't you just get burnt out, reading the same chart night after night? So I'm going to let you, the expert, kind of give us some pros and cons to that steady gig on Broadway. And just quickly walk me through what your typical day is like.
Okay. Well, the pro, I think in many ways, the pros and the cons are it's 8 shows a week. It's like, it's great. It's 8 shows a week. I get to go play my drums 8 times a week for this particular show. It's 2 hours a show, right? And that's amazing. And the downside is I get to do that 8 times a week because you're doing the same thing every time. And it'll vary, I think. My understanding is, again, I'm relatively new to this, so I don't have a huge frame of reference, but my understanding is it may vary from music director to music director in terms of how much leeway they allow in terms of the book sort of evolving over time.
Yeah. So
if you begin work on a show and the book becomes sort of solidified, right? Because oftentimes, I won't even say oftentimes, all the time, when you're handed your book, your drum music, what you ultimately play is not what's in the ink. And partly because people who orchestrate for drums aren't drummers and they don't necessarily understand what will maybe sound the best. No, I'm being serious.
No,
you know,
well,
I'm not being disrespectful in any way to the people who do that. I just think, you only know so much without playing the instrument, right? You can only know so much.
Well,
I think
I'm going back to the great Bernie Dressel, who does pretty much all Hollywood scoring on drums now. I mean, he's like one of 3 guys that does movie soundtracks. And, he said on this show, he was like, most of the time it's not a drummer that wrote, my chart. And he was like, I'll look through it and it'll be like, okay, hit these 7 things at the same time. And he's like,
totally,
dude, I've only got 4 limbs. I'm going to have to improvise. Something's getting left out. I'm not using my head on a crash cymbal. Right. So that's why I laughed.
Yeah, that's correct. Like in my, the guy who orchestrated for not for Head Over Heels, I'm sorry, for Little Shop, has a lot of flams throughout the book. And there are some times where it's like a flam and a crash cymbal. And I'm like, yeah, I can't really pull that off, So anyway, sometimes it's subtle things like that, or sometimes it's a little bigger than that. And at Head Over Heels, for example, we were doing a song and the BPMs were fairly high and it was like all 8th notes on the kick drum. And knowing the Go-Go's music, the bit that I do, it was like, no, Gina did that on the floor tom. That's not on the kick drum. That's on the floor tom. So you just move it, or you put, you just, and you make the fills maybe a little more musical, or whatever it is, and then you settle into this fill works really good here, or this is the groove for this, or whatever the case may be. And then the book really becomes solidified. And the preference is that you do it the same way every show.
Right.
It's not about you getting creative. It's not about you, let me try this tonight. Like, you're not in a touring rock band, and you're not going to improvise, and you're not going to truly, they don't really want it to have that feel. And if you think about it, and I come from a sports background, so I always apply my team concept to everything. I did it when I was in Antigone Rising. It was always about for the greater good. It was never about me. I'm more of the Ringo school of thought, and coming up with, I want to do what's going to work for the band rather than being a virtuoso and blowing chops. That's just never been my thing. I was never interested in that. I didn't work on it as a kid. I don't work on it now. I'm about the groove and the part.
Yeah.
So I very much take that seriously, particularly with Broadway, because there's so much of what you're playing that is in concert with what's happening on stage. It's, literally they have you in the room in rehearsals because they're literally choreographing to your drums. And we need a cymbal hit here because they're going to do a leg kick, or let's do a tom hit here because they're going to do a bend, or they're going to do a whatever. And it's like that. It's that specific, right? Yeah. So there's really no opportunity for you to get super creative in that. I mean, yes, in my book, there's a measure that'll have, for either a full bar or 2 beats, it'll just have a line and it'll say fill. So you create the fill. You come up with the thing. That's your opportunity to put you into the show.
Right.
When it's asking you to create a fill, there's your moment. There's your 2 beats.
Yeah.
Do something there. But other than that, there's really not a ton of creativity. You do get to put you into the book in some ways. You can tweak grooves and do things, but essentially it's handed to you. You refine it, you solidify it, and then you play it 8 times a week.
Right. So next Thursday,
I think that's what you're talking about. Like how do you get from like doing that thing, right, and not get bored out of your mind? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think next Thursday you can't decide, okay, tonight I'm going to work on my Terry Bozzio double kick ostinatos in the show.
That's correct.
You're not. That ain't That's happening. If you want to keep working, it ain't happening.
Exactly.
I guess you could do it, but.
Right, but I won't have this job for much longer.
That's right.
That's not true.
Yeah.
So another blessing of theater work is you can sub out. It's your chair, but you find your subs. You have people that you call on, that you get them ready. You get them copies of your book. You get them a conductor video. So it's literally just a recording of the conductor monitor conducting the entire show. And I actually subbed in my break from Head Over Heels to last summer until it closed. I was a sub at the Cher Show on Broadway.
Oh,
so
wow.
I had my first opportunity to be a sub, which is single-handedly like the most terrifying experience of my entire life.
I can
Opening for
only...
the Stones, 20,000 people, no problem.
Yeah.
Subbing at a Broadway show, oh my God.
I can only imagine. Because
you don't get to rehearse. You have to do the work on your own. You walk in and you play a show. You have to know the cues. You have to know it's terrifying. Anyway, so I have my crew of people, my subs, who I count on to relieve me, whether I want a night at home just to sit home and do nothing, or I have another gig.
Yeah.
You know, I get in November, I got called to do 3 weekends of shows with Kristen Chenoweth, who was one of the originals in Wicked. So I subbed out of Little Shop for 3 consecutive weekends, and I went and worked with Kristen Chenoweth, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, you have opportunities to do stuff like that. You're not, just because it's your chair doesn't mean you have to be there 6 days a week, 8 shows a week, and you can never take a break. That's not how it goes.
Yeah.
So you find ways. You take a few days off, and you go away, or you take a day off to sit home and watch football on a Sunday, or you go work another gig, whatever it is that's gonna be good for your head, and it's kind of it's a weird thing. It's like the actors are expected to be there all the time, right? Because they're visible, they're on stage, and that's who people are going to see, right? They're paying money to go see those people perform, but it's a different level of expectation, I guess, with the musicians. It's understood that we are going to take time off, and in a sense, to do right by the show, we need to take time off to make sure that our subs stay fresh and are able to play the show well.
Yeah, well, and
if they never get to do it, they never get to learn it, and they never get good at it.
Right, and
so it's kind of a weird balance.
It is, and I would assume they don't want Dena to be completely fried, and like, if I play this one more time, I'm going to go postal on everybody. These directors want you to take some time off so you can come back in 2 days fresh and ready to do it again, right?
Yeah. I mean, they always want what's best for the show, bottom line.
Yeah.
And some people will play it and not take the time, and they're happy to be there, and I'm happy to be there too. Don't get me wrong. It's just a different philosophy, I think. I think having subbed and knowing how it's hard to be good at it when you don't do it a lot. Like you get into a groove with it when you do it every so often, and being away from it for a while, it makes it hard to walk in and play a great show. Because you're doing it cold. And again, you don't get a rehearsal. You don't get, can we run this one thing? I'm not sure on how. Nope, just go do it, And it's live, It's like people are on stage counting on you, and it's a big deal, And there's really nowhere to hide when you're a drummer. That's true in any scenario, right? When you're in a rock band, when you're doing a jazz gig, if you're whatever, you can't really hide. If you're guitar 2 on a Broadway show, you could duck down for a minute and the audience is not going to feel anything.
Right.
If you're a drummer and you screw something up, if you miss a transition, if you botch a fill, if you screw up a tempo, if it's like they're going to know, people notice that, so it's a pretty pressure-filled scenario. And I just think it's helpful if the subs can go in and do it every so often. So it's good for me to step away. It's good for them to go get to play it and to refresh on the show. And it's good for everybody, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so what about you? Do you, you're playing so much, you've got, let's call it 16 hours of stage time every week. Are you still taking time at home to work on new things? Are you practicing, during that grind of being on a show? Or are you like, no, I'll get to the theater half an hour early and work on the pad? What is your practice routine like while you're on a show?
I always get on a pad at the theater. I have one that just lives there, and I pull it out before, I get up to the booth. I get my coffee. I get my water. I climb up to my treehouse, as we call it. The space there is really small. So there's a quick change booth, stage left, and there's a platform above the quick change booth where they have me in my own room, and then a curtain. And on the other side of the curtain is the bass player. So we have to climb up a metal ladder, like a picture like a jungle gym kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
It's like this crazy metal thing that we climb up and built into the side of the quick change booth to get to the treehouse. So she and I, the bass player and I, are on one side, and then similarly, directly opposite us, stage right, the guitar player and the MD are on the other side. So it's small. It's only a 4-piece band. I'm also running Ableton, which is another little challenge. So I have to cue all the click tracks and all the Ableton stuff while I'm drumming. So that was like a whole other level of stress for me for this show. But I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to learn how to do that, because that is making its way into Broadway now.
Yeah, well, and if you have
we
that
have
skill,
percussion loops, and we have keys, extra key patches and things that, is coming through the Ableton. So I'm running all that.
Well, and if you have that skill, you can go play anywhere with anybody. I mean, that's a huge skill set. It's one that I don't have, but like all of my Nashville buddies now are like experts in Ableton, right? Because it's just expected on their gig now.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't program it, so I wouldn't call myself an expert in Ableton, but I'm an expert juggler. I can swivel my foot and trigger that click and, manage the operation of it. I didn't do the programming, but that's a whole other thing that I haven't gotten to yet. But back to your question, I have not been great about spending a lot of time here in a regimented practice routine. I don't know if it's a product of my age in conjunction with, my sports background or whatever, but I have, I have some flare-ups. I have a tendonitis in my right forearm. I have a thing with my right hip flexor. I have some injuries, and it's a fine line for me. Like I can't overdo on a regular basis, or I'm going to struggle at the gig. So I have to balance that. So it's kind of a drag. But a lot of the practice that I do is in preparation for other gigs. I just did a gig last night at a place in town with an artist who was he was in Kinky Boots, and he was in Spider-Man and Rock of Ages. So he's a theater guy. His name's Joey Taranto. Crazy high voice, like sings like a lunatic, like unbelievable register for this guy. So we did a rock show last night, and I had hours of rehearsal between both of my 2 show days. So like I had a 3.5-hour rehearsal, then I played my Wednesday matinee and played a show Wednesday night. And then Saturday I played my matinee, did a 2-hour rehearsal, and then played my Saturday night show, and then played the show last night with him after my matinee.
Wow.
So it's like if it can get really busy just in the playing arena, and you have to, again, like walk the fine line between overdoing and, exerting and working on what you need to work on. So I have a list of things that I'm going to tackle once I get through, like now that I'm through this gig and I have a little bit of breathing room, I'm going to dive into some stuff here that I've been wanting to work on. So that's forthcoming, but it'll be not like I'm not doing like 5 hours in a room kind of thing. I just can't.
Right. Well, you're a woman and a drummer after my own heart, Dena, because I have a whole list of things that, like every drummer alive,
never ending,
got a whole list of things that I'm going to work on.
And it's hard. Yeah. It is, and it's hard when you're looking for other gigs all the time, right? And it's no different from even though I have a gig. Like my eyes are always like, okay, well, what can I get into next? And what's the next thing? What's the next show? And where am I going to be? And what skills might I need for that? And I need to work on that, and that kind of thing. But you're also running your own business. You're your own advocate. You have to maintain your website, and you have to field emails, and you have to do social media, and you have to, there's all that other nonsense that goes into, being your own business person.
Yeah. Well,
so
and you've got
necessary evil, and it all takes time.
Yeah. You've got dudes in Kentucky like, hey, when can we get you back on the drum shuffle all the time? It's so I totally get it. But, here's the cool thing about what you just said, kind of one of the running themes here on this show. And I think it's so important. Drummers are often, just we're pigeonholed into that, side man, side woman. You're always reliant on whatever band you're playing with or whatever the gig is, you're just a side man, right? Or a side woman. And, one of the things that I talk about all the time is we as a community of drummers need to take control of our own careers. You don't have to be beholden to your next gig. There is a whole universe of possibility out there if you just take control and think it through. And I think that's what's so cool about your gig. Yes, you're the drummer on Little Shop of Horrors, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing you're doing. You've always got the ball in motion. Like what else can I get into? Can I go do a gig, on Sunday night after the matinee? Yes. I know that's a challenge, but it's great that you do it. And it all goes into that, recipe of what makes Dena a great drummer, right?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, all those opportunities to meet people is part of the business part, right? You always networking is such a huge part of what we do in general. I didn't know, again, having been introduced to this, relatively not that long ago, it's huge in Broadway. It's who you know, because the MDs and the music supervisors and those people are the ones who are sending your name around.
Yeah.
And it's huge to be able to get into a different environment. Here's the other trap of Broadway. If you allow yourself to just do your 8 shows a week and just go to that theater every day, and that's your only circle of people, then that's as big as your circle is going to be. Your goal as a business person is always to broaden the circle, right? You want to meet more people. You want to have your name being passed around to as many people as possible. And in that, you want to show up prepared and kick ass so that people are impressed with what you do. You got to look good. You got to sound good. You got to be easy to work with. It's a whole recipe of things,
Yeah.
So last night was another opportunity for me to do that. These were people, the MD I've worked with before. He's the one who brought me in. But in terms of the artists on stage with me, I had never worked with Joey and the other people who were up there singing. And, they loved the band. They thought the band sounded great. And, Joey said to me, "Will you work with me again? I loved having you." "Of course, that'd be great. I would love to," so that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You prepare. I made my own charts, which took hours. The MD uploaded charts, but again, the beauty of being a drummer. Oh, there's a bass chart and a guitar chart and a PV, but there's no drum chart.
Right.
So either, we did a medley of songs last night, which literally, if you're following a piano vocal chart, it was 29 pages.
Oh,
am I really going to do like 20 page turns while I'm trying to play a thing that I had no idea how it went?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
I wrote my own chart and I opened it and I made it into 2 pages. We did Bat Outta Hell by Meatloaf, which is a 10-minute long song.
Yeah.
I got it onto 2 pages. I charted it to 2 pages so I could, not have to page turn.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you try to do to set yourself up to be successful and not have it be a crash and burn experience as best you can. I mean, you're going to have to, improvise and just do what you got to do to get through the gig to some degree, but because we didn't rehearse a lot, but having my own charts and being able to not be stuck in page turns, I think allowed it to be a much easier night for me. So you figure out what works for you. I mean, a lot of people now are going to the iPads.
Yeah.
They're uploading all their PDFs and all their stuff to the iPad, and you can connect a foot switch and you can do the page turns that way so that you're not doing it old school like me. I like paper. I'm old school. I don't know. There's something about having a chart on paper on a music stand that I like. I don't know. It's weird, but that's my thing.
Well, you and I traded texts about old school, when we were setting up this interview, and I'm so painfully old school. Like I did a session back in early November. First time in my career, I was asked to do a couple of Christmas tunes. Right. And,
nice.
And I'm not a guy that knows, all the chords and, I'm not a strong reader. I can barely read just enough to like, oh, okay, I kind of see what you're trying to do here. But it was with a group of guys that were all using the Nashville number system, right? And it was literally 1 page of numbers, but I was smart enough to go, okay, I see where they're doing chord changes. I see where we're changing sections. I know what to do. And literally we ran through the song a couple of times. And the second time through, the bass player was like, well, if that's not good enough, screw them, And so, I I'm breaking my arm, patting myself on the back here, but it was one of those deals where you just figure it out, right? And do your best, but you have to be at least semi-prepared in those situations.
Absolutely. And you have to be, and I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse for me. I think it can go both ways, but, with the bulk, yes, I took lessons for 8 years and I learned how to read, and I can read. I read probably better when I was 12 than I do now because I was doing it all the time, and my teacher had me reading crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And I pull those books out and I go, what the heck? I don't even know how to read that now. It's like all this crazy nonsense. But, then I got into rock bands and I wasn't reading because I didn't have to. I was playing covers, or I was, we were doing originals or whatever it was, and I didn't have to, there were no charts, right?
Right.
So I got very reliant on my ears, and my ears are good. Like, I hear things and I pay attention. And I think that, there's sort of a dialogue in the Broadway community that, Broadway used to be where you ended, not where you started, right? You would go out, you would come out of conservatory or whatever, and you would go on tour and you would do all this stuff and you'd have this career, and then you'd kind of make your way to Broadway and you'd sort of play your last however many years doing theater work. And now it's the opposite. Kids are coming out of conservatory and they want to go right to Broadway. And sort of the more old school people in the community say that those players are not as desirable because they don't have that experience. They don't have that. They haven't developed their ears. They haven't developed an ability to play in a band scenario. And even though you're reading charts, you're still playing in a band.
Yeah.
It's not just about burying your face in the book and burying your face in the chart. You still have to hear what people are doing, and you're still playing in a band.
Yes.
So it's like a fine line. You have to marry both. You have to be good at both. And I definitely rely on my ears. So my charts were good enough last night, and they were not right in a couple moments. I didn't chart things correctly, but because I could hear and I was paying attention and I wasn't just buried into my chart, I was like, oh, that's the eighth note build. I got to get into that now.
Yeah.
And boom, and I shift gears and I do, like you pay attention. You're not in a vacuum. You're making music together, even though I might be in my own booth and I'm looking at my drum book and I'm playing to a click and I'm doing all these things. You still have to listen.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a really good question. You were talking about kids coming straight from conservatory, and I say kids, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, me too, because I'm old.
Yeah, get off my lawn. But saying that they're not as desirable for Broadway, how much of that, and I want to be respectful of your time. I don't want to, kill your morning, but what I have found is sometimes you haven't learned all the shortcuts that are kind of built in, and the lingo and the vernacular. Like, when you go out on the road with a rock band, there are so many things, like my first tour that I didn't know, right? But you learn those things, and, we do it this way because it makes this easier. If you do A, B becomes easier, therefore C becomes even that much more easy, right? So I think that experience, just knowing how things are done and this is why we do it like that, you can only get that through doing, right?
Absolutely. And, and random things, like I remember when I was with Antigone, we were playing. We had the same management as the band Mo for a little while, and we played their festival. I think it was called Modown up in upstate New York or Vermont, or I forget where it was. But we were up there, and we're on stage, and the power goes out.
And, nice.
We're like in the middle of whatever we're doing, and what do you do? Like, there's no guitar, there's no vocal, there's nothing. So I keep playing. And we improvise, and Kristen, who was our rhythm guitar player and the band's original drummer, goes and grabs percussion, and we turn it into a drum jam until the power comes back on. And
right.
Like those moments, where stuff goes wrong and you can't script it, and so translate that to I'm at head over heels, and I don't know if I shared this last time, and if I did, I'm really sorry, and stop me. Not only was I in my own room, I mean, it's customary regardless. You have a conductor monitor. You've got a TV screen with your music director who you're getting all your cues from as you're playing the show, right?
Right.
So I'm down in my basement, and we're starting Act 2, and we're halfway through the opening number of Act 2, and the monitor feed goes out. So I'm in the room by myself to play the entire act, and I can't see anybody. I can't see my music director.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got
that was slightly nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I mean, you've got two choices. Either deal with it, suck it up, and trust yourself, trust your charts, trust that I've done this before, or you can just stop playing drums and become a cable technician, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but
given the choice...
Right. But had I not had my years on the road with power going out and all these random things that you're thrust into, for whatever reason, because I'm a little seasoned in that way, it was like, okay, I got this. Yeah. And kudos to my MD who brilliantly just started talking everybody through it. And the rest of the band was on the platform with her, so they had eye contact to her. But the rest of the show is being run, all the lighting cues and everything are coming off of her cues from the music stand. So it's not just about me. It's like the whole show we're just relying on, and nobody could see her.
Right.
So she just started talking through everything, and we got through it. It was great, and it was one of those things that was like, okay, I did that. Now if that ever happens again, I won't freak out. It's just having to go through it once, and you figure out a way to persevere and to, keep your head and not freak out. And, and I think I credit that to my years of touring and being a seasoned musician. Had I come right out of school and hadn't been playing in bands that would have been a whole different moment for me.
Yeah.
Completely.
I mean, you may have shut down completely. And, I think the cardinal rule on Broadway is the show must go on no matter what, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and the other tagline is, everybody says jokingly, it's live theater. Like, you get what you get. Like, shit goes on, stuff happens.
For sure.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, Dena, I've said this before, and look, I'm not trying to, embarrass you or anything like that, but I super respect what it is you do. And I'm sincere when I say you're just one of my favorite people. You always have such a positive attitude about everything, and you're always down to help and answer questions. And, kudos to you for just doing what you do at such a high level. I want to make this kind of an annual tradition. We've got to have you back more often, at least once a year, just to tell everybody what's going on, because I think we tend to focus on the guys that are out there on the road with a live band. And I find it immensely intriguing and entertaining, your role in the drumming community, because it's cool,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do, and I love talking about it, and I love sharing with other people. So I'm happy to field questions from anyone who wants to reach out to me, anybody who just is curious about anything we haven't talked about in regard to Broadway or whatever. I mean, I'm happy to be in touch with people. So
no, that's so kind.
Open invitation.
Of you. Yeah, that's so kind of you. And I'm sure that everybody knows I answer all the emails that come into the Drum Shuffle. So if you do have questions for Dena, I'm always happy to forward those along. And we try to be in contact, a few times every year. I keep telling her I'm going to come up to the city and catch a show, but it seems like I never leave Kentucky. I'm just kind of trapped down here with, in this world. But, Dena, seriously, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Keep us up to date. I'll link everything, to our show, how people can get in touch and see your website. I know you've got a contact link on your website, but keep us up to date on everything that's going on. And, we got to have you back again, because I just think this is so cool. I really do appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I'm happy to be back anytime you have time for me. You just let me know.
Awesome. You know I will. So, all right.
And for anybody interested, just a little plug for my website, DenaTauriello.com. You can find me there. And again, any questions, there is a link. You can get in touch with me directly through my website. So.
Fantastic. We'll send some folks your way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dena. Have a great one. I'll talk to you real soon.
Okay. Bye, Jamie.
See ya. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap up episode 87 of the Drum Shuffle. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We cannot do this show without you. I know I say that every week, but I'm sincere. I mean that. We can't do it without you tuning in. As always, the favor that I'm going to ask from you, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to listen to the Drum Shuffle. Also, if you can take just a minute out of your day, give us a star rating on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. That helps other folks find us in the search engines, and we certainly want to continue growing the show. It is a huge goal of mine, so thank you in advance for that. Many thanks to Dena Tauriello for taking time out of her busy schedule to join us. We have some great guests coming up. Just a few interviews that I have confirmed. Corey Coverstone from the great young rock band Dirty Honey is going to be joining me later this week for an interview, so that'll be coming your way. We're also going to have a revisit from the wonderful Scott Hessel of the Gin Blossoms. He was our guest way back on episode number 2. So looking forward to having Scott back on the show. And we're also working with Nate Morton from The Voice to get him scheduled to come back and catch everybody up. He was our guest way back on episode number 8. So you're not going to want to miss those. So make sure you keep it tuned right here because, again, we just have the best guests in the world, and we love catching up with these guys and girls about their drumming shenanigans and adventures. As always, we answer every single email we receive over at thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can find more information about me over at jamieeads.com. While you're there, click on those social media links, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We do try to have social media output. You can follow me and the show there as well, and we do appreciate that. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Catch us back here next week. We'll have another great interview for you, and hopefully you'll get something out of that as well. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.